Hi, I'm Karen.
And I'm Craig.
Welcome to the Libro.fm podcast, where Craig and I talk to authors, narrators, booksellers, and more.
On today's episode, Karen and I got to sit down with Olivie Blake, the author of the Atlas 6 and the upcoming sequel, The Atlas Paradox. We talked about how she became a writer, her process, how her book went viral when she was going into labor, and everything that's coming up with all her new books and things that are being re-released. And it's a super exciting time for her. So we were really happy that we got time to sit down with her.
I am also really excited because I finally got to ask my most burning question, Craig. I got to find out what it's like to have a pen name. So this was a really big day for me.
Karen is very interested in taxes. How do you do your taxes if you have a pen name?
It's got to be complicated.
Yes, we learned so much about tax law. Not really. Not really. Why don't we get into the interview so people can hear all about that? Do-do-do-do-do. Cue the music.
Interview.
Welcome to the Libro.fm podcast, Olivie. We've been really looking forward to chatting with you this week. Before we start peppering you with questions, we'd love for you to introduce yourself to the listeners.
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I am Olivie Blake. I am the writer of some books, one of which is the Atlas 6 and its sequel, the Atlas Paradox. I am the mother of a small goblin. So if I don't finish my sentences, that's because I have brain cells that haven't grown back yet. Yeah, great to be here.
Awesome. We've been looking forward to this all week, truly. Craig and I have both read your book. I think Craig has read it twice, so we're big fans.
I had read it like a year ago, or whenever it's Tor, right? Whenever the Tor version came out, I had grabbed it. So like a year-ish ago. And
6 months.
6 months ago. Oh my God.
I know. Time is crazy.
That's wild.
Well, I read that book 6 months ago. So when we knew this episode was coming up, I was like, you know what? I'm going to just reread it so that it's like fresh in my mind. So we just fresh off a reread here. So
love it.
Enjoyed it the second time just as much.
Okay, good. That's great news. I wasn't going to ask, but just in case you're like, you know what? It didn't hold up 6 months later.
That would make this episode awkward.
No way. No,
it was great.
Well, before we get into the book and also Atlas Paradox, the sequel or the second in the series, one of the things we wanted to talk to you about was just your journey as a writer. That's something that's really interesting to both of us and our teammates and all of our listeners. And one of the things that I read on your website that I actually didn't know until recently is that you started out pursuing a law degree. Would you be willing to talk a little bit about the decision that you made to become a full-time writer? What did that look like, and how did you decide to do that? That's a really big change.
There were a lot of steps actually in between those two things happening. I feel like the being in law school, it just like was not the place for me. I was definitely so I have a mood disorder, and I was very emotionally invested in my work. I was working for the public defender's office, and it was very emotional labor was very difficult. And I was very frustrated. I am not the kind of mind that does well in law school. I really feel like prior to that, I studied urban planning. I have a master's in urban planning. So my brain is very across the aisle thinking, creative problem solving. Like, we are going to save the world with social services. And then you enter law school where it's just like, no, you can only follow these rules and you can only think this way. And if the rule doesn't exist to help you make this good thing happen, then you can't make this good thing happen.
Gotcha.
So it's super frustrating. I was struggling really hard with my mental health. I ended up leaving law school, and then I just kind of tried to do a bunch of other jobs. I did commercial real estate for a while. I did some freelance graphic design. I designed maps for a while. Cool. And then I started writing essentially by accident. My pills didn't get refilled for reasons when I start promoting the book Alone with You in the Ether, which is more about mental health and relationships, this story will all make more sense. But essentially did not have pills, was awake in the middle of the night and didn't know what to do with myself. So I just started writing fan fiction. It was like, oh, there's this, I could just get online and write a story right now and people will read it right this instant. So for like a week, I didn't sleep at all. I just was writing fan fiction. And then I actually started to feel better. Like, this is a very controversial thing to say, but I was really at a point in my life where I wasn't doing I wasn't working a 9 to 5 job. It wasn't that important for me I had needed medication to be in the office and to like coexist with other humans, but I wasn't doing that at the time. So I started just writing a lot, and I was just writing fan fiction. And then I started to kind of break fan fiction rules where I was playing with characters and people were like, you can't do that. Like, we would prefer if you didn't make that character just a raging psychopath. So then I started writing my own stories, and I had enough of an audience by then that like I knew there's like 100 people in my pocket, you know, that would definitely read anything that I wrote. So I would write these stories. That many people would buy them. I wasn't trying to make a living. I was writing manuscripts to query for traditional publishing. All of this took a long time and was essentially very irresponsible. But I was lucky enough to have my husband. So it wasn't like, you know, like on my own, I would have starved, basically is what I'm saying. But he kind of gave me like, let's see where this goes. Let's try, see if we can make this happen. And it was kind of right at the end of like, I've been doing this for a long time. And like, maybe I need to get a real job. Like I'm running out of time to just kind of try to make this work. And that's when I wrote the Atlas 6. And
Wow.
yeah, and then so I wrote the Atlas 6 and published it in January of 2020. And then just after that, I wrote My Mechanical Romance, which is my young adult under Alexine Farrell-Fulmouth. And then I got my agent and a book deal for that book. So within the span of a few months, it was like, okay, maybe this is a real thing I could do. And then a year later, the Atlas 6 blew up, and it was like, oh, wow. Okay. So luckily I was on the right path.
Oh my gosh. This is incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. That's also, you set us up for the perfect segue. So appreciate that. Our
yeah,
next
sorry.
question.
I feel like I talked forever, but yeah.
No, I mean,
this is awesome.
no, it was great. We were both like enthralled. So yeah, no, it's super interesting. So like I was saying, that's actually the perfect segue. Like, I'm looking at my little script here, and our next question is literally about what you were just talking about. So I know some authors who are just self-published, you know, they don't have an agent, they don't have a publisher, and they're just writing. And it can be like super grueling and disheartening in a little way, right? You're putting out content into the world, but, you know, like you said, maybe you have like 50 people that read it or whatever, and it's not enough to pay the bills and all that. And obviously, you know, you struck fire with Atlas, and, you know, it got picked up and re-released. And obviously you have an agent and like, there's so many things happening for you now. But I guess I'd love for you to speak to your, you know, what that experience was like and how it shapes what you do now.
Oh, yeah. So I definitely always want to say that I think that as publishing is changing and the route that people take to publishing takes different forms, that I don't like, just want to make sure that people understand that I always wanted to be traditionally published because I don't want to be in charge of my own operations, but lots of people do. I think that there are a lot of incredible self-published authors who are totally fine to basically outsource all the stuff that normally a publisher takes care of. So like the marketing and the publicity and the interior design and the cover design and the editing, all the stuff that you could easily do for yourself if you wanted to have your own business. And like, that is astounding to me, people who can and want to do that. And you can like make money doing that. That is a plausible career path. But I hate marketing my books. I hate promoting myself. I did enjoy doing the cover design, but I never was like, my covers were never right, you know, like they didn't speak to the correct demographic. They were just whatever I was into. This was a very self-indulgent thing, my self-published books, because they were already ideas where like I would have an idea and think, this is not suited to the market. My best example of that is Masters of Death, which was my first, my first self-published book. It was 2000, I think I wrote it in 2017, which is when agents were like, don't send me vampires. Like, if you send me a vampire, I will delete it unread. So it was like, okay, the market doesn't want this. We're still oversaturated in, paranormal stuff. So I'm going to release it myself. And it's just going to be for me and what I think is funny. And then, the market obviously changed, and now it's being re-released by Tor next year. And it's just funny how these things happen. But definitely so when I wrote the Atlas 6, and I was coming from a place of, maybe there isn't room in the traditional publishing market for my voice. I was getting a lot of feedback. A lot of authors of color get this feedback that's like, I can't relate to these characters. I can't see myself in this, things that are just, I don't think there's any point tiptoeing around the fact that publishing is very white. And it is very hard to, the kind of what gets the attention of an agent is such a cerebral, no one can really explain what it is. It's not 100% what the market cares about. It's also like what that particular agent wants. It's just such a lightning strike of the right person at the right time. And I was getting the feeling like maybe that lightning isn't going to happen for me in a responsible time period. Like, I'm getting older. I want to have a baby. I need to have an income. I don't really understand, like, if this is the right thing, like how blind, like how blind can I be while I go through this process? Like, it's a dream, but at some point I have to be reasonable. And so this was kind of my last ditch effort of like, okay, I'm going to try and write a trilogy, which is the longest thing that I would have self-published at that time. I'm going to write a trilogy, and it's going to be everything that I already know publishing doesn't want. It's just going to be like 100% morally gray, completely sexually fluid. Like, it's just going to be 100% about the relationships. And I was just like, in my mind, it was coming together as this 6-person love story, psychological thriller that was also like a really strange family drama at the same time. And just really wanted to lean into that feeling of, because one of the things I took away from law school and grad school is that I love academia. I specifically love the like ego inflation of academia when you're sitting in the classroom and you are like, I am solving all the world's problems right now.
Yes.
Like, I am, because the kind of questions I would get on an exam were like, how do you fix gentrification? I'd be like, I got it. I can do it. and all, everything that is to do in the real world is theoretically possible in academia. And so I wanted to kind of have that, like, that high of being around people who are so smart and feeling like you're actually having an impact on the world when maybe you're just cloistered in the library of a secret society. So
I cannot relate to the being in college and feeling like I was solving the world's problems. I went to art school. I took basket weaving. I was not weaving a basket being like, I am just saving the world right now, Well,
I hope that maybe, your like existential crisis was like slightly softer. No, that's not true though, but with art, it's like a whole other crisis. It's more like, how do I create something of meaning?
Yeah. And what is value? Yeah.
And how does it pay the bills? Yep. So I guess there are some similarities, I like that you were on the kind of do or die, like, you know what? I need to be reasonable. Like, I've been doing this for a while. And you're like, you know what? Trilogy, go big or go home.
That's awesome.
Like, yeah.
Well, it was definitely in conjunction with the idea that I had already had my idea for my young adult, and it did feel like, okay, the market needs this. It's girls in STEM, like it's a young adult rom-com. We're having a romance like renaissance right now, and I ended up being right about that book sold very quickly. So it was kind of like, here's this thing that I'm going to do that is obviously also very important to me, very special to me. But also I'm going to let my brain play with something that I'm not even going to pretend is for mass consumption.
I just had one follow-up that I wanted to ask quick. So you obviously wrote a bunch of books before the Atlas 6. If you were going to recommend, someone that's read the Atlas 6 and hope maybe by the time this came out has read the Atlas Paradox and they want to now go back to your previous works, is there a book that you would recommend they start with?
So the timing on this is weird because a lot of my self-published books are being republished. Yeah, it's great for me, but it also
congratulations.
means that if someone wants, that if someone wants to read them, they might have to wait. So if what you like about the Atlas Six is the sort of philosophical rumination, and the more quiet interiority, then Alone with You in the Ether is definitely the book you want to read. And if what you like about the Atlas Six is more of the drama and the ensemble nature of it and the way the characters play off each other, then you probably want One for My Enemy or Masters of Death. One for My Enemy is more of a drama. It's like it's got flavors of Romeo and Juliet and like Russian mythology. And then Masters of Death is more of a comedy. It's like the closest thing I would liken it to is like Good Omens.
Okay.
Sure.
Or maybe TJ Klune, kind of like an underlying TJ Klune if he was a little bit more dysfunctional.
All right. Good Omens, TJ Klune. I think I'm going to just read this book immediately after this call.
I'm sold.
Well, I happen to have just seen the finalized new cover and the new end pages, and they're fantastic. So the final product for that book is going to be really amazing.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
I have a question. I have been dying to ask someone this question for maybe my entire life. So I'm so excited to have the opportunity to talk to you about this. I love that you use a pen name, and but first and foremost, maybe more importantly for our listeners, could you tell us a little bit about like why you decided to do that and how you chose your pen name? I'm also really interested in whether or not that gets like logistically complicated or like managing your day to day. I know that's kind of a boring question, but I'm like, does that ever get confusing with life?
A lot of people are curious about the pen name. So Olivie Blake came out of a name generator. It means basically nothing to me, except that, so I told you it was the middle of the night and I decided I wanted to write fan fiction. I wanted to write erotica because I was like, this is my opportunity to write something that like my mom will never read. And I want to kind of like flex and see if I can do something different. I guess I forgot to mention that when I dropped out of law school, the first thing I did was write a book, but I then just like put it aside because it was very self-serving. It was like, I'm in my 20s and in crisis. And that's like, I think you can feel that. But anyway, so I'd written things before and I started writing fan fiction. I wanted to write sex, didn't want my mom to see it. Used a name generator, came up with Olivie Blake. And just started posting. And for the record, you can still find all my fan fiction as Olivie Blake. I'm not ashamed, although I still hope she doesn't read it.
Hopefully your mom doesn't listen to this podcast, you know?
Yeah. No one's telling my mom about this podcast. Logistically it does become a little difficult. I think in general though, the like contracts and financials of being a writer are also very strange. Like I have an S Corp now. And so the S Corp is Olivie Blake, basically. But so people have to email me as Alexine, which people often forget to do, which I think is funny. And then I get lots of people being like, what do you want me to call you? And it's like, It really doesn't matter.
Do you ever have people like recognize you on the street that say Olivie or Alexine and you're like, wait, no, that's me?
No, I think that, I mean, to be honest, most of the day I am Olivie. Almost no one calls me Alexine. I mean, my husband doesn't call me that. He calls me Lex. So it's, like if anything, I would feel very strange if someone yelled Alexine.
I thought you were going to say he calls me Olivie. And I was like, that's interesting.
But I do, like a lot of people do, like Lil Kimura, my illustrator that I collaborate with, she calls me Olivie because of course she does, because I've been Olivie forever. Yeah, and I've been Olivie for years. So, but no one's ever recognized me. I always kind of am like, well, now maybe they would because I'm in a bookstore. Like I'm in the place where you would maybe run into me, but no one ever expects to see me, I guess. Also, I don't know why they'd know what I look like, but yeah. When I was in the San Francisco airport, I was offering the airport bookstore to sign stock. And then I was going to show them my picture to prove that it was me, because obviously my driver's license wouldn't show that. And then there was no picture. And I was like, oh, I guess you just have to take my word for it.
You're like, I promise it's me.
Did they let you do it?
Yeah, they did. And they were really excited about it. It's because the UK version has my picture. So I went to show them like, this is me. And then the US version was like,
well, you're like, I can tell you what happens on page 183.
I'm just going to start doing this myself. Just go into bookstores like, hey, can I sign these books? Like, I'm the author. Like, take my word for it. At
this point, I can tell you confidently that people won't stop you. No one has ever asked me for proof. So,
like, why does the Stephen King book say Craig inside of it? Like, you know.
That would be amazing. Oh, wait. Okay. No, I am wrong because there was one time. So the book went viral in around May of 2021, which is when my son was born. And so I was freaking out because someone had posted a picture of the book at Barnes and Noble, which is crazy. I was like, Barnes and Noble. And it happened to be the Barnes and Noble at the Grove, which is very close to me because I live in LA. So at 1 week postpartum, I took my 1 week old infant to Barnes and Noble to go see that it was really there, which was so crazy. And it was the decision of this one buyer, Renee, my best friend in the whole world now. And so I'm standing there like with the baby, like strapped to me, holding the book, just weeping.
I was just going to say, you must have been crying, and people are probably like, what? That lady really is so upset about that book.
She's so moved by this book. And then someone came over to me and I was just waiting for them to be like, ma'am, you can't cry on the merchandise.
No, I swear, look at my picture.
But it was the buyer who had ordered my book. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. It's just that this is my book. And I never thought I'd see it in stores. And he's like, yeah, I know who you are. Do you want to sign it? And I was like, ah!
Oh my God, this is the best story ever.
Beautiful. Yes, I have chills. That is so beautiful.
Go to the Barnes and Noble at the Grove. Say hi to my best friend, Renee.
Absolutely.
Just while weeping. So again, you were just setting us up with these segues perfectly. Our next story is absolutely about your book going viral while you went into labor. I read this in, I forget, some like the New York, some article, while doing research for this.
It's a common story. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't really have a question here other than please tell us the story because I just need to hear it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'd love to tell my birth story anyway. I think every woman is just waiting to be asked, what was labor like for you?
Yeah. You can skip the details to keep, yeah.
I will say that it was just so much more like athletic work than I thought it was going to be. Like, I feel like all of pop culture makes it very clear that it's painful, but it is laborious also. It's like you have to do this extreme cardio on no food and no water and no sleep. And it's crazy. And I had my like gym playlist like blasting in the background and I had to push for 4 hours. And anyway, shortly before I started pushing for 4 hours, my husband was bored, because this is much less interesting for men. This process.
It's less aerobic.
Yeah, right. They were like, you should probably warn your husband that like he's not going to have a lot going on. Like you are going to be busy.
Very busy. Yes.
Living your life through mass amounts of pain. But, so he was on my, cause it was self-published at the time. He was on my KDP for some reason. I never kept track of my sales, but he did. And he was like, there's a huge jump, like a huge jump. He's like, did you know that? And I was like, I'm in labor. I have no idea. And then I think shortly after someone sent me a message on Tumblr. Yeah, I think it was like the next day. So after I'd had the baby in the hospital, I was on my phone because he was asleep on me. And I got a message on Tumblr that was like, just so you know, there's this TikTok that's gone viral. And I was like, oh, that must be what that uptick in sales was. And I didn't really think, I didn't know how big it was. So I told my agent, like, okay, I mean, this is kind of a big deal. The book's in Barnes and Noble, like someone has chosen to stock it. And like, there's this TikTok. I don't know anything about it. I am not on TikTok. And she was like, okay, well, like, with self-published works, because I was really eager to get it traditionally published because people were starting to ask about translations and audio and hardcover. And I was just like, I have an infant. I can't, yeah. And I, because it was a trilogy, I knew I had 2 more books and I wanted to get someone to partner with basically. And, so I was like, yeah, I would like to get someone to pick this up. And she's like, we kind of have to see, like, I asked her, give me a number. And she's like, we want 50 Shades numbers, kind of like we want to see volumes of 10,000. And I was like, that's insane. No book is ever going to sell 10,000 self-published copies. And then I think it was the next month or maybe July. I was like, funny story.
Oh my gosh.
We've done the 50 Shades.
That's amazing.
I love it.
Yeah, it was a crazy, crazy time. And she's like, okay. And then she just ran with it. So this is another thing I had. So I did, as far as self-published authors go. I did have an agent, which is very, very fortunate. So I'm definitely at this point, like in the category of hybrid author, and having her there was instrumental. So
what an insane month. I'm just thinking I'm having a baby. My book is going viral. We are hitting these numbers we never hit. That must have been like just a whirlwind of emotions for like a straight 4-week period, you know?
I absolutely think that having my son was the best thing that could have happened to me in that moment, because I'm really bad with like good news. I don't know what to do with praise. Like, I'm one of those people where I just like, when things are going well, I'm just suspicious. And
when's the other shoe gonna drop?
Yeah, exactly. That's just like, oh God, what's gonna happen now? And so it's best that I haven't had a lot of time to like take the temperature of how I'm feeling. I just kind of have to move forward because I don't get to sleep. And I'm too worried about like, oh gosh, what food is he going to eat this week? So yeah, it's very, very fortunate for my psyche that this is happening while I don't really have time to live in those feelings.
Yes, you're like, everything is just momentum now, and I'm just gonna ride the wave.
Exactly. I'm running on adrenaline for sure.
So amazing. So happy for you. Congratulations, et cetera, et cetera. Now let's talk about the book.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So since we are Libro and we're big on audio, I'm going to insert a clip of the book here.
Every 10 years, a new class of potential initiates was chosen to spend 1 year in training, learning the functions of the archives and what would eventually become a lifelong craft. For 1 year, each individual selected for the society lived, ate, slept, and breathed the archives and their contents. At the end of that year, 5 of these 6 potential candidates were inducted. They would rigorously pursue an independent course of study for an additional year at the library before being presented with the opportunity to stay and continue their work as researchers, or, more likely, to accept a new offer of employment. Alexandrians typically went on to be political leaders, patrons, CEOs, and laureates. What awaited an Alexandrian after initiation was wealth, power, prestige, and knowledge beyond their wildest dreams. And thus, to be chosen to sit for initiation was the first in a lifetime of endless possibility. This was what Dalton Ellery relayed to the most recent class of candidates, none of whom had been informed why they were there or what they would be competing for.
One of the questions that Craig and I had for you is about your structure of the book, essentially. So every chapter is obviously the perspective of a different character. And I think it's always interesting to me and to Craig too. It was very interesting to me recently as well, because in our last episode, we talked to Emma Straub, who wrote essentially a time travel novel. Mm-hmm. And as we were parsing that in our minds and talking to her about it, we're like, the level of complexity to create this thing is mind-blowing, and make sure that everything ties together in the end. And even though we are suspending our disbelief, it still has a structure that makes sense. And so can you tell us a little bit about what it was like to divide an overarching plot line into 6 unique perspectives and still keep that motor, keep that engine of the plot like moving forward constantly? It just seems so hard to me.
So I'm a pantser. I don't plan ahead. I often say that I think most forms of pre-writing are just methods of procrastination, which usually makes half my audience like look very uncomfortable. But at this point, The Atlas 6 was my 9th self-published book, and I was starting to get the sense that I was running into the saggy middle problem too many times. So I basically let myself write Act 1, Part 1 and Part 2 with nothing. So essentially I jumped in, wrote every character's introduction, and then sat back and thought, okay, how is the plot going to move forward? And at that point, my outline was just the 8 parts. There's just like, okay, so this way I know how many parts there are. I know when things essentially have to happen. But as far as like which character goes where, that was very, very mood based for me. Because essentially So I always want to emphasize, I wrote this book to please me. I wrote this book to speak to what I was interested in at the time. And I was very, I wanted to really focus on the human element, that we're really going to focus on these 6 people and their relationships. They're all going to be essentially their own unreliable narrators. And there is no objective truth. Like there is no, I am never stepping in to tell you this is the story and this is what's really happening. I wanted that to be on the reader to determine in the space between points of view. So essentially every time I would write a character's perspective, and that would be the chapter, then it would be like, okay, well, if the audience is an invisible person sitting in the chair next to me, who do you think would be the next most interesting person? Like who is going to be able to see what this character didn't see? And how will that shape the plot in a different way? So one of my examples that I use for that is, there's the scene with Callum and Parisa, which is a pretty well-known scene. Their little waltz of psychological trauma. And I think that, so I could have done that scene from anyone's perspective. I chose to do it from Callum's because it wasn't about moving Parisa's backstory forward. Like it wasn't about whether what he was saying was true. It was about how he was generating it and what it was doing to the rest of the group. And so that, like, so in the moment of writing that, and which lens do I want to take? It was like, what is most important here? Is it knowing the background of this character, or is it knowing how the rest of the group is going to respond to what just happened? So that to me was moving the plot forward rather than taking a moment for a character introspection, which is, kind of a weird call because there are lots of people who ask me now, like, how much of that was real? Like, how much of that actually happened to Parisa? And it's like, well, that's not really the story, is it? Like, not at this point, not at this moment. That's not the story. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for that insight. And it totally illuminated my experience reading this, because I would be reading from one character's perspective and there would be just this little hook or a mystery where I'd go, huh? Like, what did that mean? Like, what is she talking about? And then we go to the next character from this other lens and I would go, oh, I think I'm like getting closer to like what's really happening here. And so the way that all came together to flesh out a version of truth that we never know if it's the complete version or someone's version it's so well done. I loved it.
Yeah. And I had someone, there was someone after who just very kindly wanted to do an interview with me when the book was still, a self-published baby. And they're like, yeah. And then things would happen and Callum would say something. I'd be like, yeah, Callum, you're so right. And I'd be like, is he? And she was like, oh, I don't know now. and it's like, maybe he is, but that like, to me, that active reader experience, that's part of it for me. Like I want the reader to be involved, kind of deciding what's really happening and never necessarily trusting what the narrator is telling them.
Yep.
Perhaps because I don't really trust narrators ever. So it's nice to kind of do that on purpose, that like what they're saying to you is not the objective truth.
Yes, by design.
Yeah.
I had a question about Libby, the all-powerful wormhole creating awesome person that she is. Speaking of the different perspectives, when the chapter is written from her perspective, I feel like she's so confident and like she feels like she's the best, like, she's stronger than everyone, et cetera, et cetera. And then when it's someone else's chapter and they're talking about Libby, I feel like the perspective is totally different. She's childish. She asks a million questions. She plays with her hair. She's annoying. And it almost feels like two different characters to me, depending on if it's her internal monologue or someone talking about her. And I would just love to know, is that purposeful or am I just misinterpreting?
No, yeah. So first of all, with Libby, I always like to say I made Libby very archetypal. She is supposed to feel very familiar to you. Like either she is you or she's someone you know. Because I think I knew that her storyline was going to be more complicated and that something unexpected was going to happen to her, and that the journey that she would go on, I wanted to generate a little bit of tension for the reader that's like, oh, this is the person that I feel very similar to, or that feels like someone in my real life. And now watching them make these choices is making me think about my own choices or what I would do in this situation. And so she's that way on purpose. because I wanted to mess with her a little bit more. And but also she is very much like a lot of this comes from my experience in law school. And I had not thought about this until someone was like, why are all the people in your book such bad people? And I was like, I don't think of them as bad people. I think of them as, complex and self-interested. And certainly they're not good people. But I wasn't trying to write good people. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, you know what? This is probably because I went to law school and because the kinds of people that like it's just the energy in the room when you're surrounded by people who are all the top of their class. It really changes. It kind of creates the same effect that I was doing in the manor house. It's just like you're in this very claustrophobic setting where everyone around you is the best at what they do. And so it's these very supercharged personalities. And so in some respects, I do think that like Libby, the way that Libby sees herself is, I mean, it's through a funhouse mirror. And some of that I'm sure is survival technique. But also I definitely remember being in the classroom in law school with someone who loved to hear the sound of their own voice. And it's just like, oh my God.
Yep.
And purposely, like she's the youngest for a reason. Like she's built this way for a reason. She hasn't had as much real world experience as the others. And so I think so they're not necessarily being fair to her. They're not really being correct in the way they judge her, but she also isn't able to see herself the way they see her. So yeah, it's just an ongoing, everybody, the way that all the characters see each other is, it says a lot more about them than it does about the character in question.
That is great perspective to have. And you brought up the manor house, and obviously people talk a lot about the Atlas Six in the context of dark academia. And I am a huge fan of The Secret History, and I've seen comparisons of your book to this. Like if you love The Secret History, you're going to love this. Craig, my friend here, loves The Magicians so much.
Yeah.
So we both love The Magician so much.
We both love The Magician.
Book and TV show, or just one or the other?
Yes,
okay.
Both.
All of the above.
Tangent time. I typically do not like, I mean, just like most readers, like a lot of the movie adaptations are like, oh, the book is so much better. I really love The Magicians TV show, and I think that they are both great and they're different enough that they're just their own standalone things to me, and they're both lovely. Anyway,
I definitely think that The Magicians is an example of an excellent book adaptation. And that's what I told when we were going through for the Atlas Six and it was being auctioned. And people were like, how do you envision an adaptation? And I was like, I do think that I am not the expert. Like, I'm the expert at this book, but you're going to create a completely different art form. And so as long as you stay true to the soul of what I've written, that's the only thing that's important, which is, I think, what's happening with the translation from book to TV show in The Magicians. So yeah.
Is there any update on the Atlas Six? And if there's not, I can edit this out. We were going to ask this, and we were like, oh, if there's not really an update, we can kill the question.
No, TV goes so slowly, which considering how slow publishing moves, I can't believe I have to say that, but yeah, it moves very slowly.
Yeah, I feel like there's been a V. Schwab adaptation in some form or another for like years. I'm just like, is that ever gonna? Am I ever gonna get to see The Darker Shade of Magic on TV? What's happening? Yeah.
I should say. I mean, I have an unofficial date, but I wouldn't announce it.
Sure, fair.
That's totally fair. Well, like in that dark academia realm, that would seem like punny accidentally, but are there inspirations that you have there? Kind of who do you look to that you admire as a writer in the world that you're working in?
Yes, thanks for bringing that back because I would have completely forgotten what we were talking about. So definitely I had The Secret History in the back of my head while I was writing this. And I was also thinking specifically when I decided to focus on physics and focus on science, I was thinking about how many great works there are about the sexiness of the arts. Like anything that's Faustian is usually, it has something to do with art. And I wanted to sexy up physics a little bit. I think I felt like it didn't have the same treatment. So that was just fun for me to do. And it made sense because it was like mythology and philosophy and physics are all kind of intersecting it was a great place to start. And I do want to add that dark academia wasn't like a thing you could point to yet at the time that I wrote this. Like there were, boarding school books and stuff. And obviously The Secret History had been out for a long time. It was written in the 90s or something. It wasn't like a craze yet.
It is crazy now. It's like an entire genre. Like you could fill a bookshelf with, Ninth House and Catherine House. And, there's like a million of these books. And I don't mean that disparagingly. I've read all of these and I love dark academia. You know what I mean? But
I know. I love that you call that Catherine House too. I love Catherine House. I think that it is just the right amount of weird. And it's fantastic. So you were asking about my inspiration? Because my brain also, I got distracted again by how much I love Catherine House.
We're big on tangents here. Don't worry.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. I did the worst interview that I had, or not worst interview, no fault of the interviewer. They were very good at trying to like drag me back to the subject, but they would kind of do it too early, so then I'd be sort of cut off at the knees with what I was what I was going to eventually get around to. So I was like, you're being too good of a moderator. I can't remember what I'm talking about.
Like, let me get there. Let me journey.
Yeah. I am definitely, part of what I love about The Secret History and the thing that I really purposefully wanted to do with the Atlas 6 was take that time to ruminate on what is the ethical choice here? What is the right decision? What does this mean for the, I just, the way that it goes off on those philosophical digressions, which The Secret History could do because it's literary, but you can't really do in fantasy. I think it's a lot of people, comment or criticize that my pacing is slow, but that is very purposeful because I love the pace of literary. I like the mundane. I enjoy ruminating. And I did, like I said, wanted to feel like we were in the classroom and actually having that learning high. So definitely tried to recreate that. A lot of this blurs because there's a lot of books that I read after, like Catherine House, I read afterwards and was like, oh, that's so good. Catherine House, Plain Bad Heroines. I love those.
Plain Bad Heroines is good. And that's a slow paced book. That's a pretty, there's a lot of pages in that book, but it's really good. Yeah.
It's a huge book and it does the thing with footnotes that I love. I'm really looking forward to reading Babel. I haven't yet because I'm not cool enough to receive an advanced cover or advanced copy. So I haven't gotten to it yet, but I'm excited about the footnotes part. And I also always like to talk about the book If I Had Your Face by Frances Cha, which is
I love that book.
Yes, I love that book. It's so underrated. It's so good. And what I specifically love about it is that she's kind of telling the story the same way I was, where it's like, let's juxtapose these different perspectives and we can really tell the story in a in an unconventional but very alive and dynamic way by showing you how this person views the world and then showing you how this person views the world. That's how you figure out what the world actually is. It's this blank space there. So I think that I actually read that after I wrote this, but I still think about it all the time, that's like a very good example of what I was trying to do.
That makes so much sense. I'm really glad you mentioned that book. That's a book that I've given other people and said, I love this so much. Please read this. And just the way these tiny quiet moments of one character's observation explode into a huge experience for someone else was revelatory to me.
It is. Yeah, it's so amazing. That book should be on everyone's shelf. So yeah.
So of course, as we talk about Atlas 6, that brings us to the Atlas Paradox. So we want to ask you about your new book, which comes out on October 25th, which will either be right before or right after this podcast, as we've established.
Yeah.
We were hoping that you could tell listeners what the Atlas Paradox has in store for them.
Okay. Also, I realized that I haven't talked specifically about the audiobook yet, which is so good. I don't know if that
do we want
to
pause for a second and talk about the Atlas 6 audiobook? I can move stuff around because you're right. We probably should have an audiobook question in here.
We should.
Thank you. We're not so good at moderating like that other person.
No, I feel like there was, my brain was like, oh, this would be a good time to talk about the audiobook. And then it kind of went away. But I just wanted to say, I did have a hand in casting the various actors and they're just so good. And listening, I've been listening to the audiobook, which feels so egotistical, but I've been listening to the audiobook while I sign tip-in sheets. Oh my God. Yeah. And it's just so amazing. I like to specifically say that the voice actor for Tristan chose him. Well, he's just incredibly lively, and my baby son loved his voice. So I always like to specifically say that was an easy choice. But yeah.
Does the Atlas Paradox have the same like 6 or 7 people from the Atlas 6?
Yes.
That had to have been logistically hard, right? To like 7 people's schedules.
Yeah.
Like, hey, are you all available?
So shocked, and I feel so lucky. When they told me we were going to do an ensemble cast, I was like, yes, that's perfect. That's exactly what I want. And I was just, I just feel unbelievably lucky, and also so glad that I'm not the one producing this audiobook. Like, thank God. But yeah, so the Atlas Paradox has everyone coming back, minus one, because there's so Dalton's voice is not there in this one, but he'll be back. He'll be back.
Love that.
When we also now have Gideon's voice and another character's voice, which I'm so excited. This character's perspective, that I'm not going to reveal because it's a huge spoiler, is it should hit very powerfully, sort of similar to the way that Ezra's perspective does for book 1. So and this actor, which I'm using in the they them form so as not to spoil, is incredibly talented. So yeah.
Oh my gosh, I cannot
Exciting. We were lucky enough to get a pre-copy of the audiobook. So we're very, that was part of our research.
I didn't even realize it was that much finished. I mean, I guess it would be. I don't understand how
we
things
have
work.
it. You don't have it yet, you know.
Yeah. Fine.
Yeah.
Kind of related to all of this, and before we wrap up, one thing that I am sure you get like peppered with, badgered with. I mean, so many people love the Atlas 6, and there is so much at stake in a sequel and in a trilogy. And so as people found out that the sequel is ready to come out, you must get so many questions asking for spoilers, like give us anything, give us any little tidbits. So what are some of the top questions people ask you, or like spoilers that people are looking for?
Oh, everyone always wants to know where Libby is, which of course I'm not going to tell them. So it's like, come on, guys. But I had a lot of fun when I was doing edits. On Twitter, I started posting like little completely context-free spoilers from the book. Like people would ask for a character and I'd give them a line that character said that just is unrelated to anything. And so for a long time, I wouldn't tell anyone anything about Libby. I wouldn't give them any spoilers about Libby. And then someone asked like, oh, okay, fine. If we can't have Libby, where's Gideon? And I was like, oh, he's at the pool with Libby. And everyone was like, you're terrible. And I was like, I know. But yeah, so what's funny to me is that with the Atlas Paradox, because I love the mundane so much, it's very easy to give away spoilers that are basically meaningless. So, because most of the book is, it's like still in the house. So, definitely, I am just so excited. There's just one particular point, in conjunction with the actor that I was talking about earlier, that I really hope that you go from the perspective right before and then to their perspective and feel that tension. And I'm just really like, to me, so much of this book and this series and all my writing, I guess, is that I just want like something. I want you to feel something. I want you to think about something. And I think that like particular little crevice in the book is the perfect place to feel and think. And I'm just so excited for people to have that in their hands. And I hope that it creates some tension for the reader, that it's just like, I used to feel this way about this character, and now I feel like I don't know if I feel this way. And my internal guess is that I think that people are going to come out of it 50-50 on whether they still agree with what the character did, or if they have a different opinion now reading the subsequent perspective. But I can't wait to find out. It's driving me crazy that you guys don't have the book yet.
Soon, so soon.
I know.
Speaking of like, you're seeing what people are thinking and saying, whether it's on social media or just people, this book got so big on social media, and you were also involved in like the online book world with like fanfic and self-publishing. So you're like in the book verse on the internet.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, as like now that the book is popular and like lots of readers are thinking about it and whatever and posting stuff about it leading up to and during your writing process, are you seeing the things people are saying and like, I hope that this happens in the second book, or I think that this is going to happen? And does that affect your writing process at all? Like seeing that stuff as you're literally writing the book, or is it just like tone it out, do my thing?
Definitely in between book 1 and book 2, I had to mute a lot of accounts. I had to just mute a lot of things and really stay away from social media, because book 2, I already knew was going to be hard to write, because a lot of time had passed in between. And obviously who I was from book 1 to book 2 was so different. And book 2s are just hard. Sequels are hard. I had never had to do one with this high of stakes. I don't know if anyone wants to write it. Okay, that's not true. I actually, you know, who should talk about this probably is Tracy Deonn, because I'm sure her sequel to Legendborn was in a similar position. But I really did not want to have I just had to keep bringing it back to like, what am I trying to do with this series? What is the series really about? I started from a place of how is it possible to be ethical in a world where it's impossible to be ethical? And it was really this very existential question. And at the time I was trying to decide if it was, again, ethical to have a baby when like I didn't know what the world was going to be like, and I couldn't promise anything. I couldn't promise there would be horrifying student debt, or that they'd get shot in school, or would have bodily autonomy at all. Like, this is not a great place to be bringing a human into a world. And so I started from this place of, okay, so let's accept the premise that the world as we know it is dying. What matters? And so then it was like, okay, well, what matters is what we are to each other, and the way that we treat each other, and how we make decisions. It's all based on the people in our lives. Like, the world is not going to die. It will go on without us. We are the ones that are trying to figure out how to cope. Our world ends all the time. And so I had to kind of really bring it back to, what story am I telling outside of the good and bad noise? So then going from book 2 to book 3, I had a much clearer idea of what was going to happen. So I wasn't as careful. Like, I definitely am still, I don't read theories. Like, I'm very good at like, my eyes just shut off. I do not see it when I come across things. So yeah, I will say that I haven't seen anyone be right yet.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I think that, yeah. There's some people who are sort of toe up against maybe what it might be, but not completely correct, which is very vague, obviously. But
it's very cryptic. I like it.
Yeah, functionally pointless, but you know. But definitely, I love the social media communities and how they have made like reading a much more social activity. You know, when I was a nerdy child, reading by myself is such an isolating activity, and now to have all these people to share books with, it's just fantastic. And then it was my book, you know, it was this tiny self-published book by, like, you guys can see how small I'm becoming as I'm saying this, but like,
for listeners, you're literally shrinking like into a little ball as you talk. Like,
you know, for this to happen with no publisher push, not even me pushing, I was so pregnant, I was not paying attention to social media at all.
For 4 hours, I think.
Yeah, in a different way. Different way.
Yes, in a drastically different way. Yes. And for that to happen, and for it to happen to me, it's just like, it's just crazy. I'm just not at all the kind of person who would have expected to see that kind of, I would never have expected to see any institutional support. Let's put it that way. I don't have a formal writing career. I don't have connections. So for this to happen just based on essentially word of mouth at this enormous scale, it's amazing.
We are just cheering you on 1,000,000%. Like both of us have just been smiling this whole time. Like, we're so excited for you, and just cannot wait to see what happens with the next 2 books and everything else that you write. Can I ask you one more question? I know we have like 4 minutes left, but
that's fine.
our favorite thing that we have to ask, and our coworkers, I always say this, will never forgive us if we don't ask you, what are you currently reading or listening to and enjoying? Or do you have any books that you would like to recommend to us and our listeners?
Oh gosh. Of course, this is one of those things where like, as soon as you ask, everything that I've ever read flees my brain.
Same. Anytime someone asks me this, I like pull open my Libro app and like quickly try to scroll to be like, what am I listening to?
What is a book? I forget.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I've read such amazing things recently, and there's so many things that I'm also excited about reading. Okay, first thing that's coming to mind, the Someone in Time anthology that's edited by, I want to say, Jonathan Strahan. But there's one particular story in it that's called The Difference Between Love and Time by Catherine M. Valenti. And it is a life changer. I read it and just like, I read it in nap jail when my son was sleeping on me. And then I just like wept onto his head. But that, like, I just absolutely, I've been telling everyone, actually my cousin is here staying with me. And I was like, in case you want to read stuff, I always offer my books to people, which everyone is like, this is that's not even a social activity. Why are you doing that? And I'm like, it's bookmarked. It's right there. If the mood strikes. And then I have, oh my gosh, what else? Fault Lines by Emily Itami just came out in paperback, and that's one of my favorite reads from last year. So just want to yell about that one. Light from Uncommon Stars by Ryka Aoki. It just recently came out in paperback. Amazing, amazing book. That's another life changer. Don't read it on an empty stomach though.
Good to
Karen,
know.
I like that I can see you writing these down, by the way.
So I've got like a post-it note, and then my post-it note ran out, so now I have a notebook. I'm like,
we will have a recording of this, right?
I know, but I need these tonight, Craig. I need it now.
I need my life changed immediately.
Yes.
I think one of my favorite authors that I've discovered this year is Catriona Ward. And The Last House on Needless Street is like the easiest entry point for her stuff.
I've read that one,
really good. Yeah, Sundial's amazing, but very weird. It's definitely weirder. But also what you're reading isn't really what's happening. I feel like I need to warn people of that because otherwise it feels very triggery. I have the arc for Little Eve. So that's the next thing I'm really excited about reading. Yeah, that book. So that was her second book, and it got a super small UK release, I think, but it won an award. And it's like, it was just one on the topic of re-releases. So yeah, it's getting an American release now, and I'm super excited about it.
So cool. Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for the last hour. This has actually been one of my favorite episodes, honestly. It's been just fun stories, and it's been really just so different than anyone else we've spoken with. And, really appreciate you making the time, especially in your like month leading up to your release. I'm sure you have a million things going on. So truly, thank you for the time.
Much. And I do because it's Libro. I just have to say that one of the things I'm really excited about is so I mentioned Alone with You in the Ether is getting re-released. It's coming out November 29th. And I am actually in that audiobook very briefly.
Nice.
But yeah, so I'm so excited. I'm making my audiobook debut.
That is so cool. Well, we would love to speak with you again after that comes out. Yes. And we'll, from a different perspective,
we'll interview you as a narrator.
As a narrator, exactly.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivie.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for listening to that, everyone. Before we let you go, we figured we would chat about audiobooks a little bit. So, Karen, I hear that you're listening to something you're really excited about. What is it?
Oh my gosh, thank you for asking. It's also very timely because we were talking about dark academia in the podcast and the secret history. And I saw an article recently where someone was talking about books similar to Secret History. Like, if you liked this, you'll really like XYZ. And I picked up The Orchard by David Hopen, and I'm about halfway through. I'm listening to it on audio and reading the physical version, going back and forth between them.
My favorite combo.
It's delightful. I cannot put it down. I stayed up way too late last night listening to it. So I'm a little tired.
Is your
today.
paper edition hardcover or paperback?
Paperback. I read when I'm falling asleep a lot, and it's very hard.
You don't want to knock yourself out with a.
Yes, exactly. It's dangerous.
Yeah. We remember when there was like a million reply debate about hardcover versus paperback on like the Libro internal chat?
I do.
People have strong feelings about that.
You know what I have strong feelings about?
No, tell me.
And I debate this with my sister often. She will crack the spines of her books for the situation that we're just discussing, so it's easier to hold while you're like lying down and reading, and that causes me physical pain to both think about and see.
Yes, but not as much physical pain as a hardcover book hitting you in the face when you
crashing into your face.
I've never been hit with a hardcover book because if I'm reading one in bed, I like lie on my side. But have you ever been lying in bed, and for people who can't see me right now, which is everyone other than you, Karen, you've been like holding your phone above your face while you're lying down and then drop it right on your head?
Absolutely. It's a very
like how
specific
universal
type of
that is.
pain. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's like, ow, it hurt, but also I'm ashamed.
Because it's happened so many times.
Yeah. It is good if you quickly dodge to the left or right and miss. You feel like you're like in an action movie or something. Like I'm Neo in the Matrix dodging bullets. Wow, holy moly, did I take us off on a tangent? So that audiobook, tell me about it. Dark Academia.
Oh, it's wonderful. So it is about a young man who is an Orthodox Jewish person, and he has grown up in Brooklyn, New York. And at the start of the book, his family moves to Florida, where he starts a new school, his senior year of high school, and is immediately thrust into this fascinating cast of characters who are the kind of mysterious, elite, cool kids of this institution. They take him under their wing and bring him into their very complicated world of relationships and families and things like that. So I don't want to say too much, but
And is this fantasy? Like, is there magic stuff involved, or it's like just a real?
It's just real life. Yeah. Oh, Craig, I'm sorry.
I love a good magic school, you know.
Well, that being said, I'm only halfway through, so it could take a turn that I'm not
There's still
aware
time
of.
for magic.
Yes.
All right, well, let me know how it is when you're finished. I'm curious.
I absolutely will. What are you reading and or ear reading right now?
Ear reading. I am reading the new Andy Borowitz book, Profiles in Ignorance. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He does the Borowitz Report.
Oh,
it's
okay.
like a political satire. But this is a nonfiction book, but he's like a comedian. Like he wrote or produced or whatever the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Like he comes from a comedy background, and he writes the Borowitz Report. But this is a nonfiction, but it's very funny just because the way he writes. And basically, it's about how I don't have the book right in front of me right now, but I think on the cover it says something like how American politicians have got dumber and dumber or something like that. And basically, it's about how I think it's broken into like 3 different sections, and there's ridicule, acceptance, and celebration. And it's basically how when politicians used to like say ignorant things, they would be ridiculed, right? Like the Dan Quayles and whatever of the world.
Yep.
And then it was like we kind of all just accepted that politicians can be, regular people, like people you don't want to have a beer with. They don't all have to be like Ivy League, whatever. And now it's almost like it's celebrated, right? Like the like more everyday man or whatever a politician is, or swearing, whatever, they don't know stuff, like he who must not be named. And it's now like celebrated where even smart politicians are like acting a little bit more ignorant, like to come off more everyday-ish.
Approachable, yeah.
So at the end of the day, it's like a political history book, but it's relatively short, and it's told in kind of a humorous way. I'm about halfway through it now, and I'm really enjoying it and like learning tons of stuff I didn't know, and it's nice. I like it.
That sounds fantastic. And is the
no magic though, unfortunately?
Not yet. Is the audiobook narrated by the author?
It is.
Awesome.
I'm mostly reading this one on paper because I just picked it up from my local bookstore, Brookline Booksmith, shout out. But I do have the audiobook as well, and it is narrated by him. I listened to a couple chapters like that, and he's really good at reading. So pick it up if you're into that kind of thing.
Cool. Well, if you want to read the book that Craig mentioned or that I mentioned, or any of Olivie Blake's books, you can start a new membership with Libro.fm if you haven't yet. You can use our promo code Libro Podcast, and you'll get an extra credit when you sign up.
And just a little sneak peek of what we're doing next. Karen and I are hitting the road. We're heading down to Nashville, and we're bringing all of our microphone equipment, etc. And we're getting the amazing opportunity to go sit down with Ann Patchett at her bookstore, Parnassus Books down in Nashville.
It's so funny. About a week ago, one of my friends messaged me and they said, "Have you heard of this bookstore, Parnassus in Nashville? It looks amazing. We should take a road trip." And so I'm very happy that that's how we're spending next week.
Yeah, we're going what? I don't know, like a week, not 6 days from now or something. Really, very
Yeah,
soon,
soon.
and we're very excited. So keep an ear out for that. And with that, we will let you go. So thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for listening.